And now, may we invite our second speaker, Ms. Cynthia Hendrayani, Executive Vice President of Danareksa, on stage to deliver the next context-setting presentation. Please help me welcome her.
Good morning, distinguished guests. Let me first thank you, Mr. Lavanthiru, the Executive Directors of Infra Asia, His Excellency Datuk Badrul Hisham bin Mohammed, and Mr. Wong Hing Fian. Thank you very much for very inspiring context presentation just now, and my colleague, Mr. Akbun Lee, for a very impressive presentation from SEMCOP today. First, I'd like to thank you, Infrastructure Asia, and the Singapore Sustainable Association for their kind invitation to let me speak on this esteemed event. This is my first time speaking on behalf of Danareksa, and I am very honored to speak along with the very expert speakers here today. Industrial estate is indeed a hotspot for emissions. These are derived mostly from the usage of energy, both for thermal and power, and also for massive amounts of logistics for both goods and people. When it comes to addressing emissions from industrialization, the traditional approach was to look for the large industries. We go for the cement and the steel company and limits their emission. Manufacturing for quite some time were largely absent from any discussions, at least in Indonesia, from emission limitation. Yet, its growth continued to dominate the economy of ASEAN. In the last few years, the focus is somehow shifted. A lot more attention were given to industrial parks, small and large, and thus us as industrial estate developer and operator are being asked to play the part. The question is thus how do we do that? How does an industrial estate developer and operator contributes to decarbonization without deindustrialization? After all, manufacturing has too many stakeholders with many different interests, different degrees and technicalities. In this 5 minutes context setting presentation, I'd like to briefly introduce Danareksa and our role in industrial park, and also our newest landmark industrial estate, the Industrialisations Batang, before I join the panel discussion. Perhaps little is known, even within Indonesia, about the role of Danareksa. The company is government-owned, and we're traditionally more known to be in the financial market, specifically capital market investment management. But in 2022, Danareksa were appointed by the state to become the holding for multi-sector companies in need of transformation. These are companies in the sector of financial services, industrial estate, construction, and media. In the sector of industrial estate, 7 estates has been put together as member of Danareksa. We don't know yet if more will be going ahead. In these sectors, Danareksa takes its transformational role through operational synergies and human capital development. Our aim is to create a modern and competitive industrial estate. In total, this estate has a total land areas of 7,800 hectares spread across Indonesia with over 1,600 tenants. In 2025, Danareksa itself becomes a member of the Danantara, Indonesia's sovereign wealth fund, following the completions of the transfer of shareholding from the Ministry of State of Enterprise. And you probably hear also that the Ministry of State on Enterprise recently also become a regulatory agency under the new law. In discussing industrial park decarbonization, I would like to highlight Danareksa's landmark development, the Industrialisations Batang. This industrial estate was established in 2020 and commences its development in 2022. Its first operational tenant, PT KCC Glass, is a Korean glass company which commences operation not far than more than a year ago. Today, 8 tenants is already in operations and 40 more under constructions. The estate itself spanned over 4,100 hectares and achieved its special economic zone status in March 2025. As a special economic zones, these are typically for export-oriented industries, larger investment, and receives fiscal incentives from the government of Indonesia. This includes the exemption of VATs, tax holidays, and for additional incentives for labor-intensive industries. The availability of such incentives has accelerated the development of international investment. That said, as a state-owned enterprise, our aim is beyond to sell as much land as possible, but rather to create wealth and jobs through international foreign direct investment. Being a new establishment, the estate's master plan has put logistics at the heart of its development. Not just the industry within the estate itself, but rather preparing for the flourish of the supply chain of industry that will eventually support the anchor industries. With this in mind, the site is split apart by a highway connecting major cities of Java from Jakarta to Surabaya. Similarly, a national railway owned by Kereta Api Indonesia delineates the perimeters of the estate and the sea. In future, this railway is interconnected with our dry port for logistical goods, connecting Batang to all major cities and industrial estates across Java hinterland. Talks has also begun on having a passenger train stations within this estate. Batang is also equipped with a multi-purpose sea terminal to create a more comprehensive logistical infrastructure. In future, this multi-purpose terminal will connect this industrial estate to other seaborne inter-island logistics. As it can be seen, the conceptual development of this estate incorporates in logistics in its master plan. It creates potential to move containers and passengers from road-based transport to more efficient modalities by optimizing existing infrastructures. Rail-based logistics is far more efficient in terms of ton CO2 per kilometer per tons, and sea-based logistics, I believe, is even more. By mentioning this, I would like to highlight that industrial emissions are affected both by the design and master plan elements and its operational elements, which I shall elaborate in the next slide. In the design element, as I already elaborated in previous slide, that logistical elements represent scope 2 emission for the tenants itself. This approach are clearly beneficial for the industries, as cheaper logistics is considered attractive to the industry. At the same time, it cuts carbon significantly compared to the baseline. There are also aspects of the design that influence emissions. Aspects such as positioning of the tenants for the creation of energy district will also improve efficiency. Energy district is where one integrates the generation and transmission of power, heat, and cooling to nearby customers, whereby tenants who are in need of steam and cooling can also be satisfied with waste heat conversion from power generation. Batang currently sought for license to distribute and generate our own energy from the Ministry of Energy. District energy system can potentially be created and shall affect the industrial emissions quite significantly. Especially so if such generation can be done through cleaner energy sources. And the question is then, how do we do that without sacrificing for cost competitiveness? I believe that when it comes to provision of energy sources, diversity is key. One cannot rely solely on one type of sources. It is not renewable versus fossil, but it is combination of all of that. An energy mix that creates reliability, cost efficiency, and low carbon. At the operational level, emissions can also be reduced or avoided through policy preference. industrial estate operator may take stance to limit emissions, from preventing permits for coal-based development within the estate. Surely application of such limit or policy preference translates to demand for alternative infrastructures, such as greater access to natural gas distribution, electric vehicles, and so forth, which requires clear commitment, not just from us as developer, but also from the tenant itself. Secondly, areas for emission controls are through provision of low carbon utility. Utility here, I means water, wastewater, and power. Estate operator may take the role also as utility authority and thus continue to curate low carbon utility. Transmission of water, for example, within this 4,000 hectares of space consumes a lot of energy, and this represents scope 2 emission for our tenants. So if we are able to reduce our emissions just from the distribution of water, that already reduce systematically the emission within our manufacturing tenants. The same can be said with any shared or communal facility for waste management system and other generations. Our capacity to influence the emissions from the state really depends as much as how much role we are taking within the estate management itself. This is my last slide, and I would like to close my presentation today by stating that industrial emission, again, is a combined emission of its tenant, its utility, and its logistics. Thus, our capacity to influence decarbonization depends very much on the state or the stage of each of the estate itself, and also the role that we assume as an estate operator. An industrial estate operator like us, an industrial estate can be in the stage of development, like such as what the Batang estate, or also already in operation, or already in need of transformation. The first is where the estate is developing. Emission can be largely avoided through estate design and master planning. The last is the situation where the estate is already 30, 40 years, such as in our Surabaya estate, and transformation is needed. Old assets need to be replaced with a new one, and this presents ample opportunity for efficiency improvement. For recently established operating estate, opportunity for decarbonization is like squeezing the last mile, and that's a little harder to find. The role assumed by estate manager is also defines how much we can influence decarbonization. There are estate developers in Indonesia who considers estate business merely as a real estate business, purely as a real estate. So once the tenant exists, their involvement only limited as a property manager. However, there are others who take a much greater and deeper role. They become the centralized utility authority, operator, and service provider, thus have a greater influence in decarbonization. Clearly, strengthening the role of industrial estate operator developer can thus be seen as a strategic way of achieving decarbonization from an industrial cluster point of view. With that, I conclude my context setting presentation. Thank you very much.